Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and today we're going through the rules overview video for Hoplomachus Origins by Chip Theory Games. Now, in the last video, there was one thing that I was noted on which I should definitely do because I really wanted to draft a particular unit, and during that draft period, I had said that I couldn't draft two champions. Now, champions are denoted by the star symbol on the actual chip. So I thought I could only hold to one, and that actually is for PvP rules. So I'm actually allowed to go ahead and take the hoplite that I wanted to have actually in the last video and ended up pulling back on myself. So we're going to actually be able to add this guy in, but I'm going to have to take something out. So I'm going to take out the defender this time and hope that that's a good decision, but I'm going to take the defender out and instead replace it with this guy. So now we have our starting lineup drafted of 6. That's the only correction or change I'm making. Now again, it's not wrong per se to put this defender in. I can't, that's part of the strategy of solo play. I can legitimately, it's not, what I did wasn't incorrect. I could still go ahead with the defender instead of the hoplite. However, I wanted to actually be able to utilize two champions and see how that works, at least to start with. I might run into an issue where I sit there and say maybe I needed this guy. So we'll see how it plays out in the end. So I'll put that back in the chip tray or throw it to the side. See if I can fit it in there. I cannot. There's too much in there already. So we're going to go ahead now and talk a little bit about the arena itself. So we are in Xanadu. Now, when you're playing this game, it's not always just about killing off the gladiators, although that does work. You can, in some situations, kill off gladiators and win the scenario. But when you're playing a particular map in Hoplomachus Origins, there are rules specific to this map that we have to adhere to. Now, and they obviously have a lot to do with the stone pillars that you're kind of seeing in the middle, or stone rocks you're seeing in the middle of this arena. And you're probably wondering, what are those for? Well, let's take a read through the manual together and find out what those are for those of us that are not familiar with this. So, what we have here is the Xanadu objective. So this is the map here. This is the objective section. So we're going to go ahead and just read through this. So it says, play this challenge to 6 arena points or eliminate your opponent to win. So there you go. It actually does result in either us killing off these 2 units to win, or we have to get 6 arena points. Now, how do we get those arena points is probably the next question crossing your mind. And it says we can go ahead and use a red and white D6 provided in the game to track your points, which we will do. I may even use some gems instead, just to make it a little more exciting. Maybe some colored gems. Each player only uses the 4 deployment hexes nearest to them. Well, we knew that, so the 4 deployments nearest to the enemy is these 4 blood splatters on this side of the board, and on my side I've got 4 right on the far bottom right corner. Okay, and then it says any unit occupying an arena hex gains the skill elevated. When it's saying arena hex, it's talking about these 4 positions on the mat. So if one of our gladiators happens to land on one of these spots, we automatically get the skill elevated. You might be wondering, well, what is that? There's a whole skills reference list of abilities and alt attacks and all kinds of stuff on the back of this manual. And as you'll see, you can go right down to the bottom where it says elevated. Unit does +1 damage with a successful basic attack to another unit that is not elevated. Elevated is an arena activated skill, so something that you can't, I don't believe, get in any other way. That's what it's essentially saying in that little note there. So again, if we have somebody here and I have an enemy here, I don't get that +1 damage, but if my enemy's below me and I'm on an elevated stone or pillar, then yes, I get the advantage of having elevated, gives me an extra damage on my attack. That's really useful. Now, it's not just that that's important in this particular case. There's actually points that can be accrued, and this is another way to victory. So if we take a quick look at the objective or the rest of that page, it says any unit occupying the arena hex gets, at the start of its turn, gains +1 arena point. More units means more points. So again, if we can get all of our gladiators, say on all 4 of those at the beginning of their next turn, they would get 4 points. Now we need 6 to win. So it's really just a contest of fighting off the opposite enemies and keeping them off the spots, as well as they're going to obviously be trying to heave us off of them as well. So it's going to be kind of interesting. And then it says once a player reaches 6 points or more, the challenge is immediately won. there you go. Pretty simplistic, pretty straightforward. At least it sounds that way. We're going to see how this actually pans out when we start playing, though, because I'm sure it won't be as easy as I'm making it sound. But who knows? Maybe the first one, and I got a funny feeling the first couple are going to be kind of getting your feet wet, so maybe I will do well, but we'll see myself probably fail fairly soon. The other thing you want to talk about, so now we've covered the map, is really just take a quick look at the solo trials rules section again. Remember, we did this section up here in the setup video, so we covered all the positions of our enemies here, and we know our positions are on the opposite side in the 4 blood splatter areas in terms of deployment. So we'll just kind of head down the sheet to the solo play sequence and turn order. Now this one, I have a better breakdown for this one than what's on this sheet. So we'll just read the top little bit. It says the player always takes the first turn. The player in this case is on solo is me. And it says after the board has been set, the player's phases are the same for solo as they are for PvP. When it says phases, it means deployment, moving, and attacking. The same is what it's trying to say that way. Now, what I went ahead and did was I actually went on to Board Game Geek and found a really handy reference sheet in terms of solo and what you have to do, and simplistically putting it down on paper in terms of the order or turn order of things. Now, the very top section has a solo section we went over for setting up the game, so I don't have to talk about any of this top section. The second section talks about deployment, and so this is where we're starting to talk about an actual player turn. So if we were to start our battle right now, which essentially we're going to be doing at the beginning of the next video, then we would be getting in the deploy phase, which says we can deploy a gladiator and or one tactic. So I can actually put a gladiator out and a tactic, or just a gladiator, or just a tactic, whatever I want. And again, there's strategy to how, why, and when you do any of those things. Underneath of those, they have sub-bullets that say tactics can play on own units. So, you know, just a reminder to say you can put your tactics on your own guys. And it says need to use tactical range to play tactics on opposing units. So in my case, I have things like tactics. My tactics are, and we'll go over these 6 before the video ends, but I've essentially got adrenaline and propel. And to be totally honest, both of these are actually more help to me than they are to the enemy. But there are particular tactics you can pick up that will directly negatively impact the enemy. And that's what it's essentially referring to, is the fact that you need to use your tactical range when you're actually trying to play a tactic that's a negative against another individual. If it's just against you, you're not using your tactical range. You're just deploying it. So that's pretty much that. And then, of course, you move down after the deploy phase to the move phase. Very same as the PvP. So in the move phase, not if deployed this turn. So again, if I had in the deploy phase put out the hoplite, of course I'd put his health underneath of him. And let's just do that for just the sake of showing visually. If I'd have done this and put him on the board, I can't move him this turn because he was deployed this turn. So there is that waiting period where if you wait too long to get somebody out you actually need in play, you have to realize when you first deploy them, you can't just move and attack. And the same thing, like I just mentioned, happens with attack. So move and attack you can't do either. So your guy is pretty much dead in the water for that first deployment. On the next turn, after everyone else is gone or the AI has gone, then you can begin to move your unit. So at this point, your turn's done, because just like the PvP, it's just deploy, move, and attack, and then you're done. Then it's at the bottom, then arena, meaning just move on to the arena section. This is where things get interesting because you're no longer talking about just yourself anymore. Your turn is done. It's now time for Hoplomachus Origins AI to kick in and try to, well, kick you pretty good, maybe while you're down. So this particular individual, let's just say hypothetically I deployed this individual, and say I chose not to deploy a tactic. I just wanted to get my one gladiator out for some reason. Let's just say that's what I was doing. So I put this guy on the mat. I can't move him. I can't attack with him. So now it moves on over to the other side. So we'll just follow those rules out as well. So in this situation, you deploy. So on the first available numbered hex, if units remain, you would deploy. So in a situation where you're playing a solo trial, like more likely one of these later ones where you can see the numbers start to rise, all 4 Eldorado units as well as one other person, you can see you can only have positionally 4, or just based on in terms of drafting, you can only actually have 4 in the queue on the mat, and then you essentially would have 1 in the queue waiting. So what it's saying there is if there is a spot to bring them in, on the first available numbered hex, if units remain, they'll pop in. So in other words, it could get overwhelming. And then the next thing that will happen is you're going to roll 4 dice and you see your champions card. Now you might be wondering, what the heck is that? Well, that's a whole AI system built into the solo game for how the champions react. So on the enemy side, again, this unit's not a champion, it's just a gladiator, but again, it's a you can see it has the star symbol, but this one right here has the C on it, and this is what it's referring to is the champion. So at this point, what's going to happen, and I'm sorry, I might have actually said prior these were champions. I think they're special gladiators are the ones with the stars, but for a champion, which is essentially who you're fighting against, you actually have some AI built in, and again, they're based on, you can see in the top right hand corner, they're based on whichever of the different locations you're fighting in. The dice determine how the AI works. So we're not playing in El Dorado, we're not playing in Atlantis, we are playing in Xanadu. So we'd be rolling these 4 dice pictured and then resolving those particular dice in order from top to bottom. So hypothetically, let's just say it was the turn, we'd be taking a green, a black, a blue, and a yellow, pulling the dice tray over, doing a roll, and we'd say, okay, we're resolving just the black because we rolled blanks on the other one. So then you take a quick look at your reference sheet and it'd say, heave the strongest opposing adjacent unit on the arena hex directly overhead. That's not going to happen because I'm not next to them. But let's say hypothetically my champion was here and I happen to be here. Well, he'll heave me right over his head and chuck me off of this particular rock. That's essentially what he's going to do, and it's kind of nasty. So the champions have an AI system built in, which is really, really cool. But then after the champions are done, they're or resolving those dice from top to bottom, like I mentioned. Then lastly, all your other units perform a move and attack, which would be these guys. So like Karakos, for instance, would actually go ahead and use all of the abilities. Now, the other thing to talk about is abilities. That's going down a whole other train of thought. That's something that you guys should be aware of if you're not, but essentially not like all of these guys have different abilities you have to be aware of. So for instance, Karakos here has the ready ability, which essentially is useless because she's already in play from what I understand. I believe the ready ability just means typically, say for instance, I had actually drafted her on my side and I deploy her. What ready means essentially, from my understanding, is that I would just be able to automatically move and attack with her on the turn she was deployed. Really pointless when she's facing me because, well, she's already in the action and she's going to be, ready doesn't matter. She's going to be coming at me regardless, and she's being played by the AI. So that ability doesn't really do much for the AI side of things. Maybe another reason why she's one of the first individuals to face us. On the bottom of this chip says True Strike, and it's an innate ability. Now, innate abilities are important because they're always on. Always on, no matter what. You always have to be aware of innate abilities, whether it's on yours or the enemy's. So you always want to look that stuff up. So this particular one says True Strike. So you can just take a look at that again. Skills reference list. There's multiple ways to do this, but this one's pretty easy on the back of the rulebook. It says basic attacks by this unit can be used as alternate attacks. Okay, interesting. So it's just something to keep in mind. Again, it's always active and stuff like this, but it's just something to keep in mind. Now, the other thing to mention on these particular chips is there's a whole bunch of other abilities and all kinds of stuff like that. And actually, if we just take a quick look at the rule book here, there's actually a page which will very easily pinpoint the unit chip overview. So let's say hypothetically we had this guy in play. The unit chip overview has the health in the top left corner, the attack range underneath, so letting you know how far away you can actually attack. Your movement range is obviously the shoe or boot, and then the tactical range is the 2 on this particular one with the, I don't know what that actually is. It might be, oh, it looks like it's a periscope, I think. Something like that. And then, of course, the basic attack dice. So underneath, when you do a basic attack with an enemy or even your own character, it actually tells you which dice to roll. So if you're doing a basic attack with this individual, then you'll be rolling 2 blue dice. Very simple. Innate abilities are, well, they'll say innate on them. So you just know cover's always in effect. Always be aware of what cover means. So I'd have to look that up. Ability here has retaliate. So how abilities work is abilities and alt attacks always used immediately if they apply. So essentially, If they apply, use them. If they don't, they don't. And essentially, sometimes they're used in certain situations, and at other times they're completely pointless. You just have to be aware of what they are so that you're ready to implement them when they pop up. So then we move over to unit type. So again, we talked about before, you got different icons to talk about the different types. And then the unit name, of course. So nothing overly dramatic, even when you're talking about like too many bones in comparison. Very familiar type stuff. There's a little bit of difference there with some of the stuff, but really, to be honest, very, very similar. Again, abilities were there in Too Many Bones, so they've used, and you can see how Too Many Bones evolved from this game. So it took a lot of things from this game and moved forward with them. But this game has so much strategy involved because of all the different abilities and strategic movement on the mat. And of course, the battle mat is in hexes, and there's many of them. It's not just the, I forget how many, I think it was a 4x4 grid or a 4x5 grid on the Too Many Bones. But this one's, like, Origins has one of the smaller arenas for neoprene mats, but when you're talking Rise of Rome or Lost Cities, like, these maps are massive, and I'm going to be able to show you those very soon. I'm really excited about that, but those are massive maps. Like, we're talking double, triple, actually it's probably quadruple and on ×2. It's huge. Those will be really interesting to play, but for now we're going to stick with the solo trial. So this is basically just a general rules overview. Hopefully this gives you an idea of what's going on over, kind of over top of everything. What I'm going to do now before we end the video is go through all of the ones I've drafted, and we're going to actually look up the special abilities so we're familiar with them before we start playing. Because the last thing I want to do is get into the playthrough, start moving, and you guys are going, well, I didn't know what that ability was, and you didn't look that up on camera. I just want to make sure everyone knows, and then even for my own sake, I'm sure if I miss something, then you guys will be even more able to help me. So essentially, we went ahead and drafted the Centurion. So this Centurion here has a shove ability and a parry innate. So let's take a look at what shove is for him. So shove is right here. Move this unit 1 hex into the opposing unit. That unit also moves back 1 hex. If opposing unit cannot move directly back 1 hex, shove cannot be used. Usable during the move phase. That's awesome. Like, this is an ability that's extremely strategically awesome because of a situation where we need to be on top of these pedestals for points. So if we have an enemy show up right here and my character's here, I can flat out use, in the move phase, I can flat out push this individual off the mat and I push him back 1 from me, and again, the individual cannot be pushed back if there happens to be someone behind him. So I'm assuming if this individual was here and I was here and I was like, oh, I want to push you back with my shove, I can't do it. So cool. And again, strategic placement matters here. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all pans out and how many times we can actually use those abilities. But that's really cool. And then parry here, which is, I believe, an innate ability on the bottom of the chip. Yes. So we'll take a look at that. That's always on. So for parry, it says right here, unit ignores the first successful basic attack against him each turn. Wow, so that's really good. So basically, I'm going to ignore the first successful attack. Wow, that's insane. So really, that's a massive one to have. That's a great one to have because when these guys start attacking, he's going to just ignore the first attack. The first basic one anyway. If they happen to have an ult attack or something, then that'll be a whole other situation. All right, so we moved on from the Centurion, so we can consider that one done. We're just going to flip it over on its side, and now we're going to move over to the individual who I still don't even want to try to pronounce. Poisley? I can't even say that. I think I'll break a vocal cord or something if I try to say it. So swap ability and distract innate. Okay, so swap ability sounds cool. That sounds like it's going to be useful. Unit may switch places with another adjacent unit usable during the move phase. Awesome. So that's really good. That's one of those things where you can swap with somebody for any reason. So that's really, really cool. That's potentially a great ability. Again, it tells you when to use it. Move phase. You got to remember that. And then distract is an innate ability. So distract, being innate, says all dice used by adjacent opposing units for basic attacks and skills are changed to yellow. That's amazing. And you know why that's so good is because the yellow die only has 2 successful sides on it, as you can see. The rest are all blank. This is the worst attack dice you'd want to roll with. So this guy distracts the enemy with either his charm or something, and is able to get the basic attacks to be rolled with yellow dice. That's pretty cool, or die or dice, depending on how many you're rolling. So that's really cool. All right, I think that's it for him. So we're going to go ahead and flip him over. He's from Rome. And then the hoplite here, which we managed to add in at the beginning of the video, has reposition and skewer. Man, all these sound perfect for this particular, it's like I planned it. So reposition here has, instead of attacking, the unit may move 1 hex. That's good. I guess that just, yeah, so that's awesome. So in the attack phase, I can just, so essentially I could, in the move phase, I could move 1. Actually, sorry, it's based on his movement, so he's got 2. So if I started here in the move phase, I could go, and again, after the first round goes by, because you cannot move in the first round that you're deployed, so the second round would come around, and then I go, okay, I'm gonna move 2. Boom, I'm on top of here. And then in the attack phase of that same turn, I could then go boop instead of attacking. So it just gives me more movement. He's a very, very quick unit, so that's really good. And he also has the innate ability Skewer, which sounds interesting. It sounds like an attack or something really bad. Unit's attack hits both an adjacent unit and the unit directly behind it. Oh, that's so cool. So he's essentially able to chuck likely his gigantic spear. That's thematic. And of course, if there's an enemy like this lined up and I'm, say, here, I can skewer the individual behind him as well as the individual in front. That's really, really cool. So that's his ability, or abilities. Next one up is the Retainer. So this Retainer individual, again, I haven't really been talking too much about the dice they roll either, so sorry about that. This guy rolls a black die. That's great because black, remember, is one of the strongest at 5 out of 6 potential hits. This individual doesn't do any basic attack. He's just kind of like out there to mess around with people. The Centurion uses a green, which is better. I think that might be the 4 out of 6, if I'm not mistaken. 1, 2, 3, 4, yes. And then this guy down here uses a green as well. He's called the Retainer. He has Stun, which is an alt attack, and I know that's good. But there are some exceptions to Stun that I'm aware of. So Stun says, roll 1 blue die to attempt to stun adjacent unit. A stun unit must be flipped over and ignores all stats and effects but its health. Stun lasts 1 full round until the start of that phase. Stunned beasts cannot lock players in place. Champions can be stunned by a gladiator, not a tactic. Cool. So because this guy's a gladiator, I can use the stun. And if I take a quick look referencing the Solo Trials rule sheet, at the bottom it says there are 3 exceptions to the rule. Stun must use if target adjacent opposing unit has 3 or more remaining health. Interesting. I don't know why I read that. I just saw the word stun. Skill usage by board controlled units is quite obvious. Innates work same, blah, blah, blah. There are 3 subjects to rule. Stun must use a target adjacent opposing. Okay. Okay, they just have to have a lot of health. Must use if target adjacent opposing unit has 3 or more health. Okay, well, that's good to know. All right. So there we go. And then underneath of it, combat lock. So combat lock is opposing units may no longer move for as long as they are adjacent to this unit. Opposing units attempting to pass by this unit must stop the instant they are adjacent. Skills that can displace units may have a way of breaking combat lock. Combat lock, guys, just stops an individual from moving away. It's almost like they're engaged in combat and can't leave, just so that you're familiar. So that's him. We have a couple tactics. One is Propel. From what I understand, Propel allows you to chuck somebody. I'll talk more about that in the playthrough. And Adrenaline is simply increase a friendly unit's move by range 1. So it just makes somebody a little bit faster who's typically slow. Propel, I'll actually do a quick read here if I can find it. It says, yep, launch an adjacent friendly unit 2 hexes away from this unit. Launched unit cannot move or attack this turn. Cool. So you can basically just chuck somebody, which would be awesome. You could just hurl someone onto a spot. So that's another reason why I picked it for this one, because I thought it was cool. Anyway, guys, hope this helps. If you like it, give me a thumbs up. I will see you in the playthrough. Keep on rolling solo.